The glass tower of the Innovation Square Technology Complex in Austin rose above the city as a symbol of ambition and progress. It was here, on the 22nd floor, in the Future Tech office, that Caroline Fisher worked. At 34, she was already the marketing director, a position she was justifiably proud of. Her presence in any room instantly attracted attention. Her impeccably chosen wardrobe, confident gait, and ability to express her thoughts eloquently made her a prominent figure in Austin's tech community. Caroline had a special knack for trends, her colleague later recalled in an interview. She could predict which marketing strategy would be a hit before her competitors even realized what was going on. 3 times a week, Caroline had lunch at the Austin Heights restaurant on the top floor of the neighboring building. It was there, a year and a half ago, that she met James Warren, a financial analyst at Midland Investments. Their relationship developed rapidly. 2 ambitious professionals who shared a passion for success and were accustomed to getting what they wanted. In the eyes of those around them, they were the perfect couple. At 39, James already had a reputation as one of the most promising financial minds in the city. Caroline and James complemented each other, the bartender at Austin Heights told investigators. He was reserved and methodical. She was bright and impulsive. Every Thursday they would come to us, take a table by the window, and discuss their plans for the future. Behind the facade of a successful career and bright prospects lay a growing financial problem. With a penthouse in the prestigious downtown neighborhood, membership in an elite fitness club, regular trips to spa resorts, and a collection of designer clothes, Caroline lived by the principle of work hard, spend big. In June 2024, she received a notice of a 30% rent increase. At the same time, several unsuccessful investments in startups significantly reduced her savings. Her financial situation was becoming increasingly precarious, but Caroline couldn't afford to lose her status in the eyes of her colleagues and James. She began to sink into debt, applying for new credit cards and putting off paying her bills. Every morning began with calculating expenses and balancing on the brink of financial ruin. One evening, while James was on a business trip to New York, Caroline was watching a documentary series about modern fraud. One episode told the story of a woman who faked breast cancer and collected more than $100,000 in donations from compassionate acquaintances and internet users. "I'm not going to do anything like that," Caroline wrote in her personal diary, which was later seized by investigators. But why do some people get so much support, while others are forced to fight alone? A week after watching the documentary, Caroline began her research. She spent hours studying medical websites, cancer patient forums, and blogs about fighting cancer. She paid particular attention to skin cancer. This diagnosis allowed her to have no obvious physical symptoms in the early stages and did not require immediate radical treatment such as chemotherapy with hair loss. According to a subsequent review of her browser history, Caroline viewed more than 300 pages related to melanoma and other types of skin cancer. She studied terminology, treatment protocols, side effects, and prognoses. In her notes, she recorded in detail information that could lend credibility to her story. On the evening of July 15, 2024, James received a message. "We need to talk. Can you come over?" When he arrived at Caroline's apartment, she was sitting on the sofa with her arms wrapped around her knees. Her eyes were red from crying. "I have skin cancer, stage 3 melanoma," she said in a trembling voice. "They found it by accident during a routine checkup." James was stunned. He hugged Caroline, assuring her that he would be there for her every step of the way. In the days that followed, Caroline shared the news with her close friend Rachel King, a successful lawyer whose mother had died of cancer several years earlier. Rachel reacted with deep sympathy and immediately offered her support. The reaction of those around her exceeded Caroline's expectations. James insisted on paying for the experimental treatment, which was allegedly not covered by insurance. He transferred $50,000 to her without hesitation. Colleagues organized a fundraiser, collecting another $30,000 for medical expenses. Rachel offered to accompany her to her therapy sessions. She looked so vulnerable. James later recalled in his testimony. When someone you love says they're fighting for their life, the last thing that comes to mind is to doubt it. In early August 2024, Caroline created a blog called My Battle with Melanoma. The first entry began with the words, "I never thought I would be writing a blog like this. 3 weeks ago, my life changed forever. The diagnosis that no one wants to hear became my reality." The blog quickly gained popularity. The sincerity and emotionality of Caroline's posts resonated with readers. She described in detail her visits to the doctors, her fears and hopes, and her thoughts on life and death. Photos taken in a hospital room during a prepaid tour of a private clinic under the pretext of choosing a place of treatment added credibility. A month after the blog was created, the number of subscribers exceeded 10,000. People not only expressed their support, but also donated money through a specially created donation page. Caroline's financial problems began to recede. She paid off her credit card debts and even made several investments that she had been putting off for a long time. In her diary, Caroline wrote, "Sometimes I wake up feeling guilty, but then I remember how much real support I give to other patients through my blog. Maybe it's not such a big lie if it helps others not feel alone in their struggle." James became her main support. He accompanied Caroline to the consultations she was supposedly attending at various clinics, always waiting for her in the hallway or a nearby cafe. He learned everything he could about melanoma to better understand what his beloved was going through. Caroline skillfully maintained the illusion, using knowledge gleaned from medical sources and patient forums. By the end of September 2024, Caroline had become a real star among cancer patients in Austin. She was invited to speak at cancer awareness events and was interviewed by local publications. The story of a young, successful woman who faced a terminal illness but did not lose her optimism inspired many. By early October 2024, Caroline's apartment had turned into a kind of museum of disease. Brochures on melanoma treatment lay in neat stacks on the coffee table. Magnets held a calendar with marked dates of non-existent procedures on the refrigerator, and an organizer with vitamins and empty packages of medications she never took appeared in the bathroom. The details mattered, and Caroline understood that. Credibility is created by small details. She took this phrase from her marketing course and used it to create her new reality. Caroline bought special cosmetics to imitate the side effects of treatment: paleness, dark circles under her eyes, dry skin. She changed her diet, excluding certain foods, supposedly on the recommendation of her oncologist. James often found her sleeping during the day. Imitating exhaustion from treatment was part of the act. She changed physically, Caroline's colleague recalled in an interview for a documentary. "We all saw how the disease was wearing her down. She lost weight and often looked tired. We admired her willpower to continue working despite all this." In mid-October, James decided to organize a charity evening in support of Caroline. He rented a hall at the Austin Grand Hotel, invited musicians, organized an auction, and ensured coverage of the event in the local media. More than 200 people attended the event: colleagues, friends, subscribers to Caroline's blog, and concerned residents of the city. Caroline appeared at the evening in a simple, elegant dress with a silk scarf on her head, creating the illusion that she was preparing for hair loss. Numerous photos from the event, which later became part of the prosecution's evidence, captured her carefully crafted image as a cancer fighter, fragile but unyielding. Speaking to those present, James announced the creation of the Caroline Fisher Support Fund and made an initial contribution of $100,000. His voice trembled as he spoke of his beloved's unwavering spirit. According to eyewitnesses, many in the room were unable to hold back their tears. James was infinitely devoted, noted the event organizer. He controlled every detail of the evening, wanting everything to be perfect for Caroline. His care was evident in everything. By the end of the evening, the fund had raised more than $250,000. The money was to go toward experimental treatment and medical expenses. Caroline gave a heartfelt speech of gratitude and hope, urging everyone not to take life for granted. Bank records obtained by investigators showed that over the next few weeks, a significant portion of the funds was spent on paying off Caroline's mortgage, buying designer clothes, and booking a vacation in the Maldives under the guise of recovery therapy. Parallel to the public events, Caroline became noticeably closer to Rachel King. Rachel, who had lost her mother to breast cancer 3 years earlier, saw Caroline's support as a way to cope with her own unresolved grief. According to Rachel's diary, which was seized during the investigation, they met at least 3 times a week. Rachel accompanied Caroline to the clinic, where she was allegedly undergoing treatment, prepared a special diet recommended by an oncologist, and organized a support group of mutual friends. For me, it was like a second chance, Rachel admitted to investigators. I couldn't be with my mother during the last months of her life because of an important job in another state. Caroline gave me the opportunity to make up for that, to be there, to help, to support. In early November, Caroline's influence in Austin's cancer community reached its peak. Her blog had over 50,000 subscribers. She gave lectures on cancer prevention at local schools and held online meetings with patients. For many, she became a symbol of strength and optimism. "If Caroline can do it, so can I," said Martha Jenkins, a stage 3 melanoma patient, as quoted in a local newspaper. Caroline corresponded regularly with Martha, giving her advice on coping with side effects that she herself had never experienced. The artificially created image of a cancer fighter brought Caroline not only material benefits, but also social capital. A circle of devoted followers formed around her, admiring her fortitude and wisdom in the face of death. On November 15, 2024, an event occurred that would later become a turning point in the investigation. James, concerned that Caroline's treatment was not producing the desired results, insisted on consulting with Dr. Veronica Ramirez, a dermatologist-oncologist with an impeccable reputation. "We have to explore every avenue," James said as he made an appointment for Caroline. "Dr. Ramirez is the best melanoma specialist in the state." Caroline tried to refuse, arguing that she had already consulted with enough specialists, but James's persistence left her no choice. She spent the night studying the medical history she was to present to Dr. Ramirez. According to the clinic's medical records, Caroline arrived for the consultation accompanied by James. During the appointment, she presented a folder with previous test results, skillfully forged documents created using templates and image editing software found on the internet. Dr. Veronica Ramirez, with 20 years of experience in oncology, carefully studied the materials presented. Surveillance camera footage shows her frowning several times as she rereads certain pages. "There are a few things that need clarification," Dr. Ramirez said, closing the folder. "Let's do a repeat biopsy and some additional tests. I want to be sure we're moving in the right direction." Caroline paled visibly. She began to talk about how uncomfortable the procedures were for her and how she would like to avoid another biopsy. "With stage 3 melanoma, we can't afford to miss even the slightest change," Dr. Ramirez insisted. "This is standard procedure." After the visit, Dr. Ramirez made several phone calls. She contacted the clinic listed in the documents as the place of initial diagnosis. To her surprise, she discovered that there was no patient named Caroline Fisher in their database. In Dr. Ramirez's personal notes, provided to the investigation, there is an entry dated that day. "Patient KF, suspected stage 3 melanoma." Documentation raises serious questions. Discrepancies in biopsy dates, absence of some standard tests, strange format of conclusions. The authenticity of the diagnosis must be verified. Over the next week, Dr. Ramirez conducted a thorough investigation, contacting the medical institutions listed in Caroline's records. No trace of her treatment was found anywhere. "My suspicions grew with every call," Dr. Ramirez said during the court hearing. "I was faced with a situation I had never encountered before in my practice, the possible simulation of a terminal illness." On November 20th, 2024, Dr. Ramirez scheduled a follow-up appointment for Caroline, planning to discuss her findings directly. However, Caroline canceled the appointment, citing a deterioration in her condition. This only reinforced Veronica Ramirez's suspicions. The first week of December 2024 was unusually cold for Austin. Dr. Veronica Ramirez, wrapped in a woolen scarf, hurried down the hallway of the medical center to meet with the chief physician of the oncology department. She was carrying a folder with documents collected over the past 2 weeks. According to Dr. Ramirez's diary entries, she had spent a significant amount of time trying to confirm Caroline Fisher's diagnosis. She had sent official requests to the 5 medical institutions listed in the documents Caroline had provided. The responses received from all 5 clinics confirmed her suspicions. None of these places had treated a patient named Caroline Fisher for melanoma. "This is an unprecedented case," Dr. Ramirez noted at a meeting with the chief physician. "I have good reason to believe that the patient is faking cancer. The question is how we should proceed." Medical ethics prevented Veronica Ramirez from discussing her suspicions with anyone other than her colleagues and the authorities. However, the situation was complicated by the fact that Caroline refused to return for follow-up visits, and there were no legal grounds for a compulsory examination. On December 5, 2024, after consulting with the hospital's lawyer, Dr. Ramirez filed a formal complaint with the Texas Medical Association, describing a possible case of malingering for financial gain. At the same time, James Warren began to have his own doubts. As a financial analyst accustomed to working with details, he couldn't help but notice certain inconsistencies in Caroline's medical history. James started keeping a kind of observation journal, his colleague said in an interview. He recorded the dates of the alleged procedures and compared them with Caroline's condition. Something didn't add up, and it bothered him. James was particularly alarmed by the ease with which Caroline returned to work after supposedly exhausting procedures. According to his notes, on December 7th, Caroline reported that she had undergone a particularly difficult series of procedures. However, that same evening, she gave a 2-hour presentation at a charity event without any signs of physical exhaustion. Another red flag was the lack of any real change in Caroline's physical condition. After 4 months of treatment, there were no visible signs of progression or regression of the disease. She maintained a perfect balance, sick enough to elicit sympathy, but not enough to interfere with her active social life. On December 12, 2024, James decided to take action. He called Dr. Ramirez's clinic and requested a confidential meeting without telling Caroline. Medical ethics usually did not allow doctors to discuss patients with third parties, but Dr. Ramirez, given her suspicions, agreed to meet in an informal setting. The meeting took place in a cafe near the hospital. James brought with him a folder containing a chronology of Caroline's illness, which he had compiled based on her stories and blog posts. "I don't want to sound paranoid," James began, according to Dr. Ramirez's recollections. "But some things are bothering me. Perhaps Caroline is hiding the true severity of her condition from me." Dr. Ramirez found herself in a difficult ethical situation. On the one hand, she could not violate doctor-patient confidentiality. On the other hand, she was sitting across from a man who had invested significant funds in treating an illness that might not even exist. After some thought, she chose a compromise. "I can't discuss Caroline's specific case," she said, "but I can explain how stage 3 melanoma usually progresses, what procedures are performed, and what side effects should be expected." For an hour, Dr. Ramirez described the standard protocol for treating melanoma: regular biopsies, systemic side effects, frequency of hospitalizations. With each word she spoke, James's face grew more and more concerned. After our meeting, Dr. Ramirez recalled, he asked one question: "Is it possible to undergo this treatment without visible physical consequences?" I could only answer truthfully, "No." The next day, James took a day off from work. According to his car's GPS, he visited 3 clinics that Caroline had identified as her treatment locations. At each one, he received the same answer: No patient with that name was registered. Meanwhile, Caroline, who had learned from a mutual acquaintance about James's meeting with Dr. Ramirez, began to worry. Entries in her personal diary from December 13th indicate a growing fear of exposure. "James is becoming suspicious," she wrote. "We need to be more careful. Perhaps we should announce a remission in the coming months, or find a new treatment clinic abroad." In an attempt to divert attention from the inconsistencies in her story, Caroline organized an intensive public campaign. She gave interviews to local media, increased the frequency of her blog posts, and announced the creation of a support group for young cancer patients. On December 15th, she published an emotional post. "When I feel like I have no strength left, I think of all of you who believe in me. Your support is my cure for despair." This post garnered a record number of supportive comments and a new wave of donations. However, James was no longer among the commenters. Instead, he immersed himself in a thorough investigation. He checked the financial reports of the fund created for Caroline's treatment, studied her bank statements, to which he had access as a trustee, and tracked the chronology of her movements through physical activity tracking apps. The picture that emerged was grim. Significant amounts of money from the charity fund were being transferred to Caroline's personal accounts, and on days when she was supposed to be undergoing difficult procedures. Her smartphone recorded activity in shopping malls, restaurants, and spas. The decisive evidence was a folder James found on Caroline's home computer, containing templates for medical documents and image editing software with samples of medical forms from various clinics. On December 17, 2024, after a particularly emotional speech by Caroline to a cancer support group, James asked her to come to his home for a serious conversation. She agreed, probably unaware of the extent of his investigation. The atmosphere in James's apartment was tense. On the coffee table lay printed evidence of deception, bank statements, screenshots of image editing software, a chronology of contradictions in her stories. "I want to hear the truth, Caroline." His voice sounded tired and disappointed. "Did you ever have cancer?" According to James's testimony, recorded later, Caroline initially tried to deny the accusations. She talked about documents lost by clinics, about private doctors whose services are not registered in official databases. But when confronted with concrete evidence, specifically a folder of medical report templates on her own computer, her defense began to crumble. "It was a moment of weakness," she finally admitted. "I was in a desperate financial situation. I thought it would be a one-time thing, and then I would recover, and it would all be over. But it got out of control." James sat silently, his hands shaking. "You let me think you were dying," he said quietly. "I spent sleepless nights reading about melanoma, talked to the best specialists, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. Was it all a lie?" Realizing that denying the obvious was useless, Caroline changed her tactics. In a preserved audio recording of the conversation, made by James without her knowledge, Caroline's tone changes from apologetic to accusatory. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be a woman in a world where you're judged only by your appearance and status?" Her voice was now more confident. "I didn't ask you for money. You insisted. You liked being the hero who saved a dying woman. It gave you a sense of control and superiority." Caroline's attempt to shift the blame onto James only made the situation worse. He demanded that she return all the donations and publicly admit to the deception. "You'll destroy me with this," Caroline objected. "People are counting on me. I've become a symbol of hope." "You've become a symbol of lies," James replied. "And if you don't admit it yourself, I'll do it for you." The meeting ended without a concrete decision. Caroline left, saying she needed time to think. James was left alone with the realization that the last few months of his life had been built on a monstrous deception. According to the security camera footage in the stairwell, Caroline left James's apartment at 11:17 p.m. Her face was tense, her movements abrupt. The taxi driver who picked her up from James's house later recalled that she had made several phone calls, sounding increasingly agitated. James Warren did not show up for work for the next 3 days after the confrontation. According to his cell phone provider, his phone was turned off, and neighbors told investigators that they saw lights on in his apartment almost around the clock. According to his browser history, which was later recovered, James had been intensively researching information about charity fraud, the legal consequences of faking illness, and the psychology of liars. In his diary, found during a search, he wrote, "She wasn't just deceiving me. She was exploiting the real tragedy of thousands of people for her own gain. She was playing on people's deepest fears. This isn't just a lie, it's a betrayal of humanity itself." On December 20th, 2024, James finally got in touch. He sent several work emails, called colleagues, and even left a comment on Caroline's blog, a short, "Hang in there, we're all with you," which, in light of subsequent events, took on an ominous tone. Of particular interest to the investigation were transactions made with James's bank card during this period. On December 20th, he visited a specialty chemical store where, according to the receipt, he purchased several over-the-counter chemical compounds. On the same day, he paid for expedited delivery of several more components from an online distributor of laboratory materials. He acted methodically, as if he were solving a complex financial problem, the prosecutor noted during the trial. All his actions were deliberate and consistent. On December 21st, Caroline posted an emotional message on her blog. "The universe sends us trials to test our spirit. The more difficult the path, the more important the goal. Soon, I will have a special announcement for all of you, my dear supporters." This post received a record number of comments. Many subscribers assumed that it was about some kind of breakthrough in treatment. In fact, as an analysis of her personal correspondence later showed, Caroline planned to announce a spontaneous remission and gradually end her deception, keeping the funds she had raised and her reputation as a miraculously healed patient. That same day, Rachel King, a close friend of Caroline's, sent her a message. "James called. He wants to organize a surprise for you at the Christmas charity dinner. He seems excited, but in a good way. Maybe you've made up." According to Rachel's subsequent testimony, Caroline seemed concerned about this message. She tried to contact James several times, but he only responded with short, reassuring messages, postponing a serious conversation until the charity event. The Christmas charity event in support of cancer patients was scheduled for December 23rd at the Four Seasons Hotel in Austin. Caroline was to appear as a guest of honor and face of the fight against melanoma. The organizers expected to raise at least $500,000 in donations. Hotel surveillance camera footage showed that James arrived 2 hours before the event began. He introduced himself as the person in charge of drinks for VIP guests and spent some time in the kitchen, where, according to one of the chefs, he was checking the quality of the champagne for the main participants. Caroline appeared at the event at exactly 7 p.m., accompanied by Rachel. She wore an elegant dark blue dress and a silk scarf on her head, which had become her trademark. Several journalists immediately surrounded her, asking her to comment on her heroic struggle. At 7:30 p.m., the official part of the evening began. The main organizer introduced Caroline as an inspiration to us all and announced a special toast in her honor. James personally presented her with a glass of champagne with strawberries, "Our little ritual," as he explained to those present. According to surveillance camera footage and eyewitness accounts, Caroline took a few sips and then continued to chat with the guests. About 40 minutes later, she complained of dizziness and nausea. One of the doctors present suggested that she sit down and drink some water, explaining the symptoms as possible fatigue. At 8:35 p.m., in the middle of her speech, Caroline suddenly fell silent, grabbed her throat, and collapsed. Panic ensued. Several doctors who were present at the event rushed to her aid. An ambulance was called. She was gasping for air, her pulse was weak and irregular, recalled Dr. Alan Freeman, a cardiologist who was among the guests. We began resuscitation efforts, but it was clear that something very serious was happening. Caroline Fisher was taken to Austin Central Hospital at 9:05 p.m. Despite the doctor's best efforts, she was pronounced dead at 10:17 p.m. The initial medical report indicated acute cardiovascular failure, possibly caused by complications from cancer treatment. Given her diagnosis, this explanation seemed logical. The body was sent for a standard autopsy, which is performed in cases of death from disease. While the cancer community mourned the death of their inspiration, and the media published touching stories about a life cut short, a conversation took place at the hospital that changed the course of events. Dr. Veronica Ramirez, upon learning of Caroline's death, contacted the morgue and asked them to postpone any conclusions until a detailed toxicological analysis had been conducted. She also insisted on special attention being paid to the condition of the internal organs. The absence of signs of long-term cancer treatment could confirm her suspicions. On December 25, 2024, the preliminary autopsy results puzzled the pathologist. No traces of cancer or long-term treatment were found in Caroline's body. Moreover, preliminary toxicological analysis revealed the presence of an unusual combination of toxins that required further study. At that point, Detective Michael Donovan of the Austin Police Department's Homicide Division joined the case. With 20 years of experience, he was known for his methodical approach and attention to detail. In cases where the cause of death is unclear, the first 48 hours are crucial, Donovan explained in a lecture at the police academy a year later. We start with the question, what led to the death? And then we inevitably move on to the question, who could have wanted this death? Over the next 3 days, Detective Donovan studied Caroline's environment, her activities over the past few months, her financial transactions, and her social connections. The key moment came when he met with Dr. Veronica Ramirez. On December 27, 2024, Dr. Ramirez provided Detective Donovan with all the materials she had collected regarding suspicions of malingering. She explained her attempts to obtain Caroline's medical records from various clinics and the lack of any confirmation of her diagnosis. I cannot say with certainty whether she was faking her illness, Dr. Ramirez noted in a recorded interview. But as a doctor with many years of experience working with cancer patients, I can say that her behavior and condition did not match the stated diagnosis. This information radically changed the direction of the investigation. Detective Donovan obtained a warrant to access Caroline's computer and phone. Analysis of her electronic devices revealed folders with fake medical documents, search history on melanoma symptoms, and methods for creating fake medical reports. Of particular interest was the correspondence between Caroline and James in the days leading up to her death. Several deleted but recovered messages indicated a serious conflict and threats from James to expose her deception. At the same time, toxicology experts completed their analysis of the substances found in Caroline's body. The results were unequivocal. Death was caused by poisoning with a rare combination of chemical compounds, which, when consumed together, cause symptoms similar to acute heart failure. On December 30, 2024, Detective Donovan gained access to surveillance camera footage from the Four Seasons Hotel. They clearly showed James adding something to a specific glass of champagne before handing it to Caroline. Motive, opportunity, intent. All three key elements of the crime were present, the prosecutor later commented. James's financial and emotional investment in treating a non-existent illness, his presence at the event, and his deliberate actions with the glass, all pointed to his guilt. Further investigation revealed that 3 days before the charity evening, James had withdrawn a significant amount of cash from his account and purchased a plane ticket to Costa Rica with an open departure date. On January 1, 2025, when New Year's celebrations were in full swing, Detective Donovan and a team of officers arrived at James's apartment with an arrest warrant. James was arrested without resistance. A search of his apartment revealed traces of chemical compounds matching those found in Caroline's body, as well as detailed records of her deception. "I do not admit my guilt," James said upon his arrest. "I only restored justice." By this time, the story of Caroline's fraud had begun to leak into the media, causing shock and outrage in the community, especially among those who were actually suffering from cancer. She used our pain, our fear, our sympathy, said Martha Jenkins, a real melanoma patient who was inspired by Caroline's story, in an interview. This betrayal is unforgivable. The investigation continued to reveal the extent of the deception. During her 6-month battle with cancer, Caroline raised more than $800,000 in donations, most of which was spent on personal needs: travel, designer clothes, investments. The news was particularly hard on Rachel King, who had lost her mother to cancer and had sincerely supported Caroline all this time. "I feel used," she said in her testimony. "Caroline knew about my trauma and cynically exploited it. But at the same time, no one deserves such a death." The case received widespread publicity, raising questions about ethics, trust, and the limits of human compassion. Many people who had donated money to Caroline demanded their money back, but most of it had already been spent. January 2025 was unusually cold in Austin. The lights were on around the clock in Detective Michael Donovan's office in the Homicide Division of the Police Department. The walls were covered with photographs, timelines, and diagrams reflecting a complex story of deception and revenge. "A classic revenge killing usually has a simple structure," Donovan explained at a briefing for the investigation team. "But this case is multi-layered. We have a victim who was a criminal herself, and a killer who is also a victim of fraud." The key piece of the puzzle was the results of a complete toxicology report received on January 3, 2025. The analysis confirmed that Caroline Fisher's death was caused by a combination of chemical compounds that, when consumed together, caused symptoms similar to heart failure. These compounds, rare and specific, not used in normal medical practice, were found in her glass of champagne and in her body. The choice of poison indicates careful planning, the toxicologist noted in his conclusion. This combination requires special knowledge and access to certain chemical components. Detective Donovan traced the purchase of these components to a chemical reagent store and an online order paid for with James Warren's credit card. Email records showed that James, using his financial education, had studied the properties of various compounds and their interactions. In parallel with the technical aspects of the investigation, Detective Donovan delved into the psychological motives behind the crime. Rachel King, a close friend of Caroline's, and a witness to the development of the relationship between the victim and the killer, played a key role in this. On January 5, 2025, Rachel gave detailed testimony, revealing details of the conflict between Caroline and James. "Caroline called me on the evening of December 17th in a state of panic," Rachel recalled. She said that James knew everything. He had found evidence of her deception and confronted her. According to Rachel's testimony, Caroline described James as icy during their conversation. "He didn't yell or threaten me. That was the scariest part. He just looked at me as if I were something inhuman," Rachel quoted her friend as saying. Rachel's account of the following days was particularly important to the investigation. According to her, James unexpectedly changed his tone with Caroline, from cold confrontation to reconciliation. He suggested closing the subject and discussing everything at a charity event. Caroline was confused, Rachel testified. She said it wasn't like James to change his position so quickly, but she wanted so much to believe that the conflict would be resolved without a public scandal. This testimony confirmed the premeditated nature of the crime. James did not act in the heat of the moment. He carefully planned the murder, creating the illusion of reconciliation. By mid-January, the investigation had reached a new level, revealing the extent of Caroline's fraud and the depth of James's psychological trauma. An analysis of financial documents showed that during her illness, Caroline had collected more than $800,000 in donations, of which at least $150,000 came personally from James. "In fact, this is a large-scale financial scam," commented a federal consultant involved in the investigation. If the victim had survived, she would have faced serious charges of aggravated fraud. The investigation also established that Caroline planned to complete her scheme by announcing a miraculous recovery and moving to another state. Her email contained job inquiries in Seattle and information about real estate there. On January 10, 2025, James Warren was formally charged with first-degree murder. At the first hearing, he refused to admit his guilt, despite compelling evidence. "My client should be judged in the context of the emotional and financial trauma he has endured," said Sandra Clark, James's attorney. This does not excuse his actions, but it does shed light on the complex psychological dynamics of this case. The trial began on March 15, 2025, and attracted considerable public attention. Over 5 days of hearings, the jury heard a story intertwined with deception, betrayal, revenge, and moral ambiguity. Prosecutor Eric Marshall built his case on irrefutable technical evidence, surveillance camera footage, toxicology reports, and a history of chemical purchases. No matter what the victim did, the law does not give anyone the right to take the law into their own hands, he emphasized in his closing argument. James Warren acted cold-bloodedly and deliberately, taking the life of a man he once loved. The defense focused on the defendant's psychological state. Experts were called in to describe the depth of trauma that large-scale emotional deception can cause. Imagine that the person you trusted most has been making you believe for months that he is about to die, Clark told the jury. You give them your time, money, emotions, everything, only to find out later that it was all a cynical game. The testimony of real cancer patients who had been deceived by Caroline played a special role in the trial. They described how her inspiring story gave them hope and how devastating it was when her deception was exposed. "She stole more than just money," testified Martha Jenkins, a patient with real melanoma. "She stole our faith in human decency." Dr. Veronica Ramirez, speaking in court, described her professional path to suspecting that the illness was faked. "In my practice, I encounter death regularly. That is why manipulating a cancer diagnosis seems particularly cruel to me." On March 25, 2025, the jury returned its verdict. James Warren was found guilty of second-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, but with mitigating factors related to his psychological state. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. "There are no winners in this case," Judge Robert Higgins said in announcing the sentence. "It demonstrates how one deception can set off a tragic chain of events that destroys many lives." The consequences of this story were multifaceted. The Cancer Patient Support Fund created in Caroline's name was reorganized under the management of an independent board. The remaining funds, about $200,000, were directed to helping real patients. Rachel King initiated the creation of a verification system for charitable fundraising related to medical diagnoses. This initiative, called the Transparency Protocol, was soon adopted by many crowdfunding platforms. For the medical community, this case became a reason to review ethical protocols related to patient confidentiality and the need to verify information in certain situations. The balance between trust in the patient and protecting society from fraud is a complex ethical dilemma, Dr. Ramirez noted in her article for a medical journal a year later. "Our profession is based on the presumption of honesty in the doctor-patient relationship, but the case of Caroline Fisher shows that sometimes a more critical approach is required." In his final report for a documentary film about the Fisher-Warren case, Detective Donovan reflected on the moral lessons of this tragedy. "There are no absolute good or bad characters in this case. Everyone made choices that led to tragedy. Caroline chose the path of deception, manipulating the deepest human fears and hopes. James chose revenge over justice. Both of these choices had irreparable consequences."